the new director of the Center for a Sustainable Future, and thank you for joining us for the first in a series of sustainability and innovation lectures. Really talks, conversations, I think more so, we'll find throughout the course of the semester. So join us every Wednesday. We've got a great lineup of folks talking about what they're doing here in our region in terms of sustainability and innovation. So we're really looking with this series to highlight what campus and community are doing to promote innovative and engaging ways to advance sustainability in our region. So thanks for being here and joining us. If you didn't see them out front, want to see what's coming up, watch for these out on the front table. Has a list of everybody that's coming to talk. So you'll want to mark your calendars for those. Also on the front table, if you weren't aware, and I know many of you in the room are, we do offer degree programs in sustainability. So we offer an undergraduate minor and a major, and a graduate certificate. So there's all kinds of materials out there highlighting our alumni. So feel free to pick those up, learn a little bit more about the program that we have for yourself, or maybe someone you know that maybe wants to learn more about sustainability. Let's see. Before we get too far in, I definitely want to thank our sponsors that made all this possible. So A5, which is a really sustainability-minded marketing organization firm out of Chicago. We've got their principal on here to speak next week. So you might catch that. Innovative Solar, thank them for theirs as well. And of course, NIPSCO. We'll hear more from them in just a moment. And 88.1 WBPE also is helping to promote the event. So thank our sponsors very much for helping to make this event possible. Let's see, what else? Definitely want to, where's our tech crew? Thank you, tech guy. We're streaming, thank you. We're streaming live, and we're going to be capturing this so that we can share this in the future, but also because we have one of our graduate students that is living far, far away, but wants to participate. So, hi, Kirby. Yes, he's out there, but we can't see him anymore. So that's a lot of fun. Great way to get the word out further. Before I introduce our speakers, we actually have two delightful surprises. I'd like you to introduce yourselves to one another. So looking around the room, you may recognize people that you know. You don't need to introduce yourself to your friends. Find someone you don't know, introduce yourself, what brings you here, something else unique about you, so you have a chance to make a connection, because that's really what we're trying to do here, right? To make some connections between not just our speakers, but amongst one another.
David.
Sarah, I'm a graduate student.
Don't rule them up.
I think that you have.
Yeah. Yeah, I was one of the few environmental policy
We're within hours.
What's your folder? I think off the look, it's going to be report cards.
You think I had it?
No, that's it.
I did. do remember it. That's crazy. I can remember my kindergarten teachers either.
That's amazing. I can remember my kindergarten teacher once in between and now.
All right, well, this group can probably just talk amongst yourselves all night, but we did bring some special speakers in today, so I'm going to hand it over to them. They've got a lot to share about really how they got here doing the work that they do. I think you'll find them very different paths that brought them both to the same platform here tonight. And there'll be some time afterwards for question and answers, so feel free to cut to them and ask them answer those. So, on the far end here we have Angie Nelson, who is Public Affairs with NIPSCO, and Dan Platt, that's Environmental Policy. So we're really getting that full spectrum here tonight. So thank you so much for joining us. And I'll let you say a little bit more about yourself if you want. And,
Yes, sir.
Yep, I'll start, and the PowerPoint is linked. It's a little long, so we won't stick to the program per se, but again, my name is Angie Nelson Deitch. I'm coming up on 5 years with NIPSCO. A little bit, Mike was one of the first folks I met here in South Bend when I started here, and immediately we kind of connected, and we've been sponsoring ever since, so it's been a great partnership. He's sitting next to one of our short timers at NIPSCO. His last day is tomorrow, so I'm kind of I'm jealous. So anyway, just a little bit about myself. I actually was born and raised in Northwest Indiana, Michigan City, and my family moved to Florida. And so I ended up going to school at Florida A&M and Florida State and getting my bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. And worked with the phone company for about 10 years and moved around the country and ended up in Chicago and moved back home. So during the economic downtime, I took a buyout from the company, and then I decided to go back to grad school. I was on the city council in Michigan City, very active with my kids and coaching, and decided I was going to go to law school. Well, since I've been out of school for about 15, almost 20 years at the time, I was like, maybe I should go back and get a certificate or something. And I ended up at IU Northwest at the SPIA program, working on a certificate. Well, the money didn't work out for law school, so I found myself in school full time and didn't know much about sustainability. And it was weird because it's like my life transformed at that time. I had an excellent advisor, and I got my master's, my MPA, in public administration there, with most of my emphasis on environmental. So, and then I ended up going to law school. So it was just one of those things that, you know, we went from a household of a bunch of garbage to a household of a bunch of recyclables and this much trash. So it kind of opened up my eyes and broadened my horizons in dealing with my kids and how we impact the world and how others impact us. So it was just one of those things that kind of transformed out of a necessity to find something else to do. So I started law school part-time for about a year, and then I hadn't even applied for this job, and I ended up with this job. It was just somebody who knew me, and I told myself I would never work for a corporation again. They're the big bad people of the world, and I was just done with corporate America. And I happened to be on their community advisory panel for NIPSCO, and found that they were focused on employee engagement. They were doing things in the community. I knew Dave before I even started with NIPSCO, just from getting out in the community and doing different things. So it kind of just worked out that they had some of the same goals in mind that I did, and so I accepted the job, and I've been there ever since. So law school took a back seat. I wanted to be the nutty professor. I didn't want to be an attorney. I wanted to be a professor of law. So maybe later, after in another life, but that's kind of how I came to be. So I handle public affairs for 6 counties, LaPorte County going east, and I handle charitable contributions, any major projects, sponsorships, if there are complaints, storm outages, because we have electric and gas leaks, primarily here in Stewart County. If there's any issues with gas leaks or anything of that nature, usually I'm the one they call for that. So that's kind of my role is spokesperson for NIPSCO. So typically I do a presentation like this, I count on people like Dan. So I figured since this isn't my content necessarily, I'm the regurgitator, why don't I bring the person who actually helps me with this to the presentation to help with it. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on the presentation because it's a lot of information. I can always email you what we have and share it, and that way we have more time for questions, but we'll hit some areas because there's a lot of stuff in there and we may bore you a little bit, so I don't want to do that.
We'll hit the highlights.
I'll let Dan introduce himself.
So a little bit about myself. My name's Dan Platt. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited. I was actually an IU South Bend graduate. I graduated in the last century. And so I was a 98 graduate here. And my last year here, my 4th year of school, this is probably the first time I think I've been in here since 1998. It was right after Y Camp was built. So it looks like it's been kept up pretty well. A few scuffs here and there, but it looks like, for close to a 20-year-old building, it looks pretty good still. So a little bit about myself. I grew up kind of back and forth, south suburbs of Chicago. I spent the summers in Rochester, Indiana, and grew up wrestling and kayaking. Those are still two of my biggest passions is paddling. And that was actually what primarily what brought me to South Bend, actually. I was going to wrestle for Notre Dame when they had a wrestling program. And my junior year, they got rid of the program, but I fell in love with South Bend because of the East Race kayak course, what goes down there. So rather than that, and I looked into, I actually wanted to graduate in 4 years rather than 6 years like most wrestlers have to. So I just did some coaching in college and did a few tournaments. So went through my undergraduate through the School of Public Environmental Affairs as an environmental policy graduate. From here was really loved the experience, loved the school here, learned a lot, got a lot of great connections that really kind of led me into a career in environmental. I've always been in environmental, and I've been in the field for 18 years. If anybody's thinking about a career, I've never had a day off in my life in terms of being laid off or anything like that. It's a great field. So when I graduated here, it only took me 2 days to get a job. So I went to work for the Department of Environmental Management for IDEM, and I spent 10 years with IDEM. Actually out of the South Bend regional office for 8 of those 10 years. I was a drinking water inspector for quite a few years, looking at like what's happening in Flint right now. It's really interesting to see it from that perspective because I can't ever imagine IDEM ever coming in and taking over a water company like what's happened in Flint with that. So it's kind of interesting just to see it from that perspective. I did the Grand Calumet River Remedial Action Plan, and it was basically Indiana's representative for Great Lakes issues on Lake Michigan. So spent 10 years with IDEM, and I never, to be honest with you, grew up. If you would have told me 15 years ago I was going to work for NIPSCO, I thought you were crazy. I never thought of NIPSCO as an environmentally a company that really I would relate to as somebody who with strong environmental values. I was basically recruited into the company because, they brought me in for an interview. I'm like, dirty NIPSCO, I'm not going to work for you guys and so forth. But came into it, and Kelly Carmichael, who's now the Vice President of Environmental, the company is really wanting to kind of change. It's not really change its image, it's more change the culture to embrace sustainability. And he recognized, I was very involved with a lot of different, outside of IDEM, different environmental organizations. Shirley Heinz Land Trust, I've been on their board forever. A lot of different regional organizations like that what are involved with conservation. And, it really did kind of open my eyes. So I finally agreed to him. He basically said he needed people like me to kind of change the company, to embrace sustainability, bring in some new ideas, and kind of move the company forward rather from thinking from a quarter-to-quarter basis which that's kind of what there's almost kind of this mantra within NIPSCO, this kind of old NIPSCO mentality versus new NIPSCO. New NIPSCO is kind of embracing the long-term, looking not 1 quarter, 2 quarters ahead, but looking down 5, 10, literally 60 years. What I do as environmental policy, the decisions that I'm making and influencing right now are literally influencing 2 generations ahead of us, because these are big investments what we're making and what we put in place in terms of pollution control equipment, things like that. They're long-lived, hundreds of $1-million pieces of equipment. So that's a lot of what I do. So I went to work for NIPSCO. It was kind of a different, I almost felt like when I first came to work as environmentalists who infiltrated industry, but I quickly found that there's a lot more of us like that, and the company has been turning over and changing a lot, where it's getting more and more kind of sustainability-minded folks in the company, and I think that it's really kind of served the company very well, because and we'll get into it when we get into the presentation. So that's a lot of, pretty much in a nutshell. I've been working for NiSource, which is the parent company of NIPSCO, for 8 years. I do environmental policy work, mostly around water issues, natural resource issues. I do a lot of stakeholder outreach with environmental organizations, a lot of restoration projects, kind of fun stuff like that too. So.
We consider them fun, so. So listening to both of us, I guess, we kind of both got here for different reasons, but on the onset, we were like, no way we would be at NIPSCO. So my perspective was more from a standpoint on what do we do in the community? How do we engage people? How do we increase the quality of life for folks? Being on the city council, I was one of those advocates on how do we get the community engaged and make sure that everybody has a fair shake. So that's part of sustainability. So if you look at our mission statement, our vision is to establish a legacy of sustained environmental stewardship. That's just one piece. But then you look at economic growth, social responsibility, all those different things are important to us. So I don't think people realize when you think of sustainability, it's about all those things, not just the environmental piece. And a lot of times people want to say, oh, people want to go green, they want to be that, and it's more to it. It's about the quality of life for people and the long term, as Dan said, long-term piece. So when you look at it, we have our sustainability broken out to 5 facets, I call facets. One being the environmental stewardship, and we'll talk about some of those projects. Like you mentioned, our air pollution control in Michigan City, also down in some other areas like Wheatfield and over. We have a gen station also at Schaefer. Our strong growing communities, that's another thing. We give, $1 million a year away, to local organizations. And as a matter of fact, we just met a couple of weeks ago, and we put together a grant system for environmental projects, small grants, that we're going to try to push forward this year. Be like a $50,000 pie, but we can focus on small projects, environmental projects, whether it's through schools, elementary schools, things like that. Customer-focused energy solutions, we'll talk a little bit about that. Where, times are hard. We're an electric and gas company. Here, we're just only gas in St. Joe County. But I have parts of my territory that are electric and gas. And we know that during the winter months, there are hardships for folks. So I'll talk a little bit about what we do as a company to help our customers, with their bills and some of the things that we try to implement from a company standpoint. And then our employees. I don't think people look at that either. It's important for us that our employees are engaged. We now have a program that we call Dollars for Doers. Anytime we have a group of employees that goes out and does a project, the company gets $20 per hour, match up to $500 per employee each year. And I max out every year. So, any non-for-profit that, our employees are engaged in, they can donate money just because they volunteer their time. So we really employee engagement. And then we also push group projects as well, so they don't, if you do a group project with your team, those hours don't count against you. So you still got your $500, and then I have all my group projects. So my numbers probably add up to about $1,000. So good thing for that. And then we focus on safety. And then shareholder value, of course. It is our duty as a regulated company to make sure that we are doing our due diligence to make sure we keep prices low for our customers and make sure that it's an efficient way to do that. So I don't have a clicker. I'm not going to go through these because these are really labor intensive, but again, as I said, with employee engagement, we have a couple of different things that we've implemented over the last couple of years. Safety is the topic no matter what meeting we have, and I should have done that. We usually have a safety moment. Right now, it's that time of year for slips, trips, and falls, so make sure, you're very aware, but we do that. We send out a safety message every week. We have safety briefs every week. Whenever there's a team meeting, we start with the safety moment. That is something that has been ingrained since I've been here in our employees. We have to back into our parking spaces. All of our facilities you only can back in or pull through. You always have to park that way.
I was proud of Angie, she actually backed in here tonight too.
So
I still thought I was a IUSB student.
Okay, so
Bad NIPSCO employee.
yeah, so those certain things we're trying to ingrain in our employees that, we want you to be able to go home to your families the way you came to work, right? We want everybody to be safe. Another thing, modernizing our infrastructure. That's big right now. People don't realize that if something's broken at home or gets old, don't you replace it like a roof? Things like that. Well, pipes in the ground are 50, 60 years old, and some of these poles are that old. So we're going through that process now of replacing some of our old with new. Especially here in South Bend, we had a lot of old pipe in the ground. We've been going through that. We had a project late last year downtown where we had to replace some old pipe that's in the ground because things leak. You don't want gas leaks, and integrity is important. So what we're trying to do is get ahead of that. So we're doing evaluations. We're trying to get ahead of that gas leak that could occur because of integrity. So those are just some of the things that we're pushing in that area. Stakeholder pledge. Again, we just had a meeting. I was in Plymouth the other day. You guys don't have electric with us, but I have electric in different areas. And, the number one thing people want to know, when is my power going to be back on? When your power's out, you don't realize it impacts your everything, right? When your power's out, you don't have hot water, your cell phone, you can't charge it. My kids go crazy. So, that's one of the things that we've been really focusing on is how do we communicate with our customers? Now we have texting. If you can report through mobile, you can report a gas leak, you can report a power outage now. And now we have two-way communication. We can send it back, let you know that your power's back on. Things like that. People don't realize it takes money to do that. And so trying to catch up and keep up with technology is important as well. So we try to be as transparent as we can, and I hope, and I tell all my communities this, that I hope that we've done a better job, being a community partner, partnering with different organizations like IU South Bend. When there's a need, I get calls all the time. I got a call last night, and I answer my phone. My cell phone is on the website. It's on my office, so people can call me, and they're like, "You're crazy for doing that." But you just never know. On a Friday evening, if you got somebody without power who has oxygen or something like that, we try to make ourselves available for things like that. So I think we've transitioned, like the new versus the old. Most of us, it's a lot of us now, and that's unusual. You can walk into a room of NIPSCO employees, and half the employees have less than 10 years. That's different. No spite against you, Dave, but it's different. So how many of you have called 811 before? Anyone? If you ever did, here you are, call 811, okay? I don't want you hitting anything in the ground, but we've really been pushing that message over the last couple of years through advertising, print ad, radio. If you know anyone, we do training with the fire departments. We try to talk to our police departments and all of that as far as damage prevention, because that's important as well.
All right. So, there's a little block over it, but, oh, you can see it here, good. So, what does sustainability mean to NiSource? You know, like what Angie hit on, it's not just environmental. Really what we're trying to hit is that sweet spot in the middle. It's looking for opportunities for, the economic, the social, as well as the environmental. And down here are some of the different things that basically categories that we look at. Eco-efficiency, we've got, and we'll get into a lot of it further in the presentation, a lot of programs, yes, we're trying to provide low-cost power, but we're trying to do it in the most environmentally friendly way possible. But we also want to give our customers, especially ones who maybe want to even go a little bit further, to have options where they could basically green up what generation is being provided to them. Biodiversity, we own lots and lots, hundreds of miles of right-of-way. A big part of what I'm doing right now is developing a conservation framework for literally every piece of property that we have. We're going to categorize so our rights away from going from something that could be a vector for invasive species, invasive plants with a lot of really high biodiverse natural areas around Northwest Indiana and Northern Indiana. We don't want our properties to be something that diminishes that natural value. We want it to complement it. So we're part of the coastal cooperative weed management area. We train our people in the field to early identify new invasive species, eradicate those, so we don't become vectors for invasive species. Social, Angie will hit a lot on that, different things that we do around that. Everything from, really a lot of it has to do with stakeholder engagement, being, a very ethical company. We always make the list every year for one of the most ethical companies in the world, actually. And then the economic dimension of it, and everything from investing in new pollution control infrastructure. We're putting in 2 large, 100 and some mile long, I think one's 110 miles. They're called the MVP projects, and what's basically doing is taking wind energy from when you get down to Benton County, a little bit north of Lafayette, there's all these wind farms, and there's a big bottleneck there, so this is getting wind energy to market. Next slide. This slide really is to try and represent, especially for people who are more green-minded, what you can do and what we provide for people to try and incentivize them to basically become more sustainability minded. Everything from appliance recycling. So you've got that old refrigerator in your garage you keep your pop in, and in the summertime, these old refrigerators are running up your bill. We'll give you $50 to recycle that. We'll come and pick that up, and it helps us too as well, because when we're taking off these old inefficient appliances, we're not having to provide that extra energy, so we're not basically, for lack of a better term, building new generation by being more efficient. We've got a lot of programs around energy efficiency. We'll talk about green power. Who here has heard of NIPSCO's green power program? Anybody? A couple? So for about $2 a month, NIPSCO will provide, we'll buy what's called renewable energy credits. It's RECs for short. And what it is, it basically offsets what you would use using renewable power, what you would be normally using. So it's kind of like a carbon credit for a lack of a better term, but they're called renewable energy credits. NIPSCO doesn't make a dime off of it, it's just a pass-through thing. But basically, we'll buy these credits on your behalf, and it goes onto your bill. It's about $2 a month. I think it's actually a little less than that
Depending
now.
on what you, like I'm 25.
Yeah, $2 a month for, I'm 100%, so it's like $2 a month for that. A lot of different programs around energy home assessments, energy efficiency programs, a lot around weatherization, low-income weatherization. We'll talk more about those when we get going. You want to talk about these?
So I'll talk about these. So basically, you mentioned appliance recycling. Has anyone ever had a home assessment done? I had one done. And basically, what that assessment is, they'll come into your home. I'm not sure, we used to use Energizing Indiana. We no longer do that. We've been revamping all of our energy programs now. But basically, they will come in with the computer and kind of take a look at, your insulation, how long you've had it, your windows, your doorways, all those different things, and then give you a kind of an overview of things you can do differently, and then they provide you a kit. We also did programs in the school system similar, where the kids would get like a timer for the shower, which I love the timer for the shower. If you had your teenagers in the house, it's quite helpful, but that's kind of what the home energy assessments are. Then energy efficiency rebates. Has anybody ever used one of those? So like if you're replacing a water heater, I had a friend here in South Bend, if you go to our website, basically it has a list of replacing a furnace, water heater, thermostat, you can get money back from doing that. So if you ever...
With energy efficient, more energy efficient.
Yes, so if you, more energy efficient. So if you ever have a situation or have a friend or anybody has a busted water heater, anything they have to replace, go out there and look.
So, like, I just recently installed a Nest thermostat, so something like that.
Yeah, and you still have your receipt. I think it's within a certain time frame, you still can do it.
Okay.
Yeah, so go out to the website and look it up, and you can print off the form. So I encourage anybody, if you're replacing anything or
I forgot how much it is, 25 or 50, I think
yeah,
it's
it's still, it's money back.
Yeah.
And they'll send you the check direct, so.
But around furnaces especially and water heaters, there's some pretty significant incentives to get you to buy. And a lot of times it makes up that difference of what kind of a lower efficiency one is versus that. That's kind of why we try to do it, to get you to go with the better, more higher efficiency model.
And then with lighting discounts, I don't know if you've seen like in Walmart or Lowe's, they'll say provided by, name the company. Those light bulbs are at a discounted rate because we partnered with some of the stores and home goods stores to provide LED lights and CFL bulbs. So that's another thing we've done. Income qualified weatherization. Basically, we have different non-for-profit organizations we usually partner with. You can go and sign up. Usually it's the North Community Action Agencies, sometimes the trustee's office, places like that where you can go sign up and see if you're income qualified to get your house weatherized. Let me talk about education. We do some prescriptive incentives for businesses. So if you own a small business or a part of the business, we also offer rebates for them as well. That's what group Dave came from Major Accounts, and a lot of times you'll have customers who are going through retrofits or replacing lights and things like that, and we'll put together a package for them for rebates as well.
So one of the other, we've got quite a few different programs, but one of the things that we've been trying to encourage is electric vehicles. So we had a couple series of large investments. I think a couple $1 million now we've put into this, which this is one of our really successful ones. I think it's about the last 4 years we've had this now, and we'll pay up to $1,650 to have a home charging system installed in your garage. And the thing that's really nice about it is there's free overnight charging. So if you had like a Chevy Eco or a Nissan Leaf, you could basically run your vehicle for free with this program. And it also incentivizes to pay for the charging system. That pretty much will pay for the charging system. I've heard, 100 here, 100 there, but pretty close to that. So we've also installed, next slide, a lot of, you're probably starting to see more of these around electric vehicle charging stations around northern Indiana. I forget, about 40 of them? Yeah, there's 40 of them we've put in so far. This has just been in the last 2 years since we've done that. Next slide. Also, folks who would like to really green up their energy, we will pay a premium on it. So we have two different programs. One is called net metering. So that would be if you went to your house and you put in solar panels on your house. For lack of a better term, it's your meter spins backwards. You're putting power back into it, so your electric bill will be less. We also have what's called a feed-in tariff. This is something we had approved with the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission. What we do is we pay a premium for basically small to mid-scale renewable energy projects. So a lot's gone in around like Goshen, for example, and several solar farms have gone in as a result of this. So we are basically paying a premium for solar, wind, and biomass are kind of the three categories that we've been working on with this. So next slide. Green power, like I mentioned, you can elect about between 25, 50, or 100% of your energy usage would basically be attributed to green power with us buying these renewable energy credits. It's about $2 a month, and it would go onto your bill. This is something that's totally, totally voluntary. But if this is something that you'd like to do, we definitely encourage you to sign up for it. It's very easy to sign up for this. Call 1-800-4NIPSCO, and there's one of the people on there will actually kind of walk you right through it. So, or you can do it online too as well. Next slide.
So I talked, and I won't go into detail. You can kind of take notes on this, but we talk about energy assistance. Usually around this time of year, beginning November 1st is when we start really pushing our hardship and our energy assistance before the winter months. And we have all these different options that when they call into NIPSCO, our goal is to keep people with their power and their gas on. And I don't think people realize, I get every kind of story you could ever possibly hear about on a Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock when the gas or electric has been turned off. But one thing that I found, we had someone come out and talk to a community group from our customer service center. And it's usually about 140 days before that they haven't paid before we actually turn somebody off in some cases. So what has happened is, I tell anybody, before you get cut off, please call us. Do not wait, until it's the day of the disconnect notice. And I tell people, I was a poor law student and single parent with 2 kids, so I know, when you need assistance, you need it. And I tell people, don't wait till after you've been shut off. It's harder to get turned back on than getting assistance up front. So whenever I'm out in communities and I'm talking to them, I always tell them, don't wait. Call and see if there's something we can do. And also another thing that I push is called the gift of warmth. There's these gift certificates that you can buy. But some people are have a lot of pride and don't like to be helped. I'll have someone call in and say, we have a lady at work who's struggling, and she won't take any help from us. You can buy a certificate and apply it to her account without her knowing, anonymous. So there's different things you can do and that we offer. And I always share that every time I speak to someone, I share that because it's very important. But LIHEAP is a federal grant. We do this every year. It's done through the community action agencies. I think here too, we partner with Salvation Army. When we give them a grant to do some things with Team Heat, these things here locally. NIPSCO Care Discount, that's another one, and then NIPSCO Hardship. I don't think people realize we have a group of people, working class, that don't fall into low income, aren't eligible for receiving assistance, that still may just have a few months where you're off from work or you're in construction. That's that category. The 151 to 200% can still get assistance. And I don't think people know that. They just think, well, I'm not super low income, so I can't get any help. And that's not the case. So I always encourage people, if you're struggling, or if you know someone who's struggling, have them call in and see, what agencies are local in the local area to help. And then we also work with churches to do matching funds as well. And then you also have your township trustees. So this is just some statistics on how many customers. This is from last winter cycle. We had 32,000 customers that participated in LIHEAP. LIHEAP customers, they're automatically enrolled, and then they receive a bill discount, and it shows up on their bill. The hardship funds, one of the things, and I'm always amazed, is that we never spend all that money. And people are struggling, saying, okay, I can't pay my bill, but we don't use those funds up every year. And I'm always amazed, that people aren't calling in when they need assistance. Budget billing plan, 30% of customers enrolled. I use that. Township trustees. The other thing about LIHEAP customers is that there's a cap deposit. Because people always ask that question, how is my deposit calculated? Things like that. I think it's capped at $50. So we have a lot of programs. Winter moratorium begins November 1st, I think it's through March 15th, where we can't shut our gas customers who are enrolled in that off during that time. But one thing I encourage people to do is still pay your bill. Because what will happen is people during the moratorium will just not pay anything on their bill, and that bill is still accumulating. Then March 15th gets here, and then they're getting a shut-off notice because they hadn't paid anything towards their NIPSCO bill. So I always encourage, pay something each month on your NIPSCO bill, or do like I did when I got my income tax check. I just paid it, each year. Yeah, like I said, I was a poor grad student and law student, so I've been there. I'm gonna skip through those. How much time we have, Mike?
7:47.
Okay,
So probably about another 10 minutes. So
Okay, I'm
go
good.
to questions.
So, supporting economic growth, so, capital investment, $200 million. Over the last 5 years that I've been here, $5.2 million in charitable contributions, to more than 600 organizations. So in South Bend, St. Joe County is my largest county. So, I know just in the last year in my 6 counties, we've given $200,000 out to non-for-profit organizations. So that's the nice part of my job. The hard part is who you give it to and all of that. So then scholarships to support economic development courses. We partner with Ivy Tech as well. We have a program with Ivy Tech in Valparaiso, an energy program. But also we have in the high school, we just started an energy academy in LaPorte County at the Career Tech Center for high school students. So those high school students will have, I think, almost 20 credits towards community college, towards their degree, their associate's degree, focused on energy and engineering. So we're trying to get our pipeline moving, getting the students, these are good paying jobs, and I tell everybody that, good paying jobs, you still got to go to school, whether it's 2 years, and those 2-year degrees are like gold right now too. So I encourage, everybody to look at, the different careers. And then we work with a lot of economic development organizations as well.
All right, around environmental stewardship, quite a bit of investment in, especially the last 3-4 years, in our generation as well as in our transmission. Almost $1 billion has been spent for putting in what are called scrubbers. They basically take out sulfur dioxide, NOx, basically nitrogen compounds, as well as mercury, hazardous air pollutants, HAPs, pretty much all of the criteria. Air pollutants will reduce between about 97 and 98% these scrubbers will. So we just installed one in at Schaefer at Michigan City, across there. Could you go back one? I have another. Oh yeah, that's it. Next one. In terms of greenhouse gas emissions, a lot of this is actually driven by how we're generating. So we bought what's called Sugar Creek. It's a natural gas-fired combined cycle plant. Has about half the carbon footprint. Really none of the mercury issues, things like that, that are associated with burning coal. So a lot of that has changed. We're buying 100 megawatts of solar power now too as well. And then we also have all of the power what's provided from feed-in tariff as well as people who net meter. So we've reduced, since 2010, it's actually changed quite a bit in just last year. This was up until 2014. 2015, we burned a lot less coal even that year. So that number will probably change quite a bit this coming year. But reduction in greenhouse gases. With our scrubbers, one of the byproducts is gypsum, basically the wall board, what you see in the wall. There, we actually have a wall board plant, US gypsum, I think it's called.
Right on site.
Yeah, right on site where they make wall board out of that. So about 80% of that is reused or recycled. And then, we participate in a lot of different environmental organizations across Northwest Indiana too as well, local conservation groups, Shirley Hines Land Trust, Nature Conservancy, Save the Dunes, the Indiana DNR, a lot of different organizations. We try to partner with them to provide funds for restoration as well as for acquisition. Angie hit on employee engagement. We started this about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. It's called NEAT, the NIPSCO Environmental Action Team, and it's an all-volunteer organization of NIPSCO and NiSource employees that we go out and do projects with groups like the National Lake Shore, Shirley Hines, local parks departments, and a lot of it's usually doing restoration works or projects like that. And then, like I mentioned before too, a big thing that we're working on, we're launching this year is our conservation framework, which is very unique for most utilities. Most utilities don't. We're probably one of the first in the country who will have a framework for what basically promote the whole premise of it is promoting biodiversity and reducing our footprint with our the way we do business, basically. These are just some graphs about these are air pollutants, nitrogen oxide, NOx, and sulfur dioxide. These are after the scrubbers have come on, and they're going to continue because Michigan City just went online.
This month.
Yeah, this month. So that's going to sharply decline there too as well, as far as emissions go. What that does help, obviously it helps with air quality, human health, but also it helps ensure that we're in compliance with the Clean Air Act. If you're out of compliance with the Clean Air Act, areas like this could be penalized. So if you're out of compliance for ozone, it actually has kind of a direct economic disincentive for new businesses to move to your area. So, this helps that as well. Next one. Land conservation and land acquisition. Just in the last about 5 years, actually about 4 years, we've invested about $5 million in conservation across NiSource's footprint. A lot of it has been in NIPSCO's territory. Probably the bulk of it has been. We helped pull together the stakeholder group where we spent it was actually $2 million with expanding the Indiana Dunes National Lake Shore. Shirley Hines Land Trust doubled their Meadowbrook property. we're working with locally here in St. Joe County too as well with a big project that you'll probably hear about very soon. Just I'll put a teaser out there. It's going to be pretty cool. We also do a lot in terms of trying to provide some, we're really looking for partners in the conservation world who are looking for basically projects, and we a lot of times provide match for those. Next slide. Carbon dioxide, basically greenhouse gas emissions. This is showing kind of a steady decrease. What 2014, if you look at 14, because this is everything that's public now, you're going to see a pretty sharp decline in 2015 from where the graph is. So it's continuing to decline. Next slide. A lot of people probably heard about the Clean Power Plan. A lot of coverage in this in the Wall Street Journal, a lot of national publications, and what it is it's really putting in very strict controls, which is continuing to move utilities further and further away from coal generation. I won't get into the details of this too much, what's in the plan, but basically NiSource is on track for compliance with this, and a lot of it's just kind of ratcheting down what we do in terms of generation around coal. These are a lot of the different stakeholders who have been involved with this. You've probably seen in Indiana, the Pence administration in Indiana has been very staunch in opposition to this plan, because it does, it will unfortunately bring up people's energy bills. It's inevitable that's going to happen. So this is something that's kind of, especially from somebody who's a SPIA graduate, it's really interesting because it's always this balancing act between trying to do the right thing to be as green as you can, but also not having people where they can't afford their, the bills in the winter, and you have people like that. So it's really trying to hit kind of that sweet spot in terms of doing the right thing and also keeping it affordable.
I won't really hit much on that, but basically over there on the table, every 2 years we produce a sustainability report, so feel free to take one of those. I'm trying to get rid of all my supplies. Because we're going to be coming up on a new one at the end of the year, and I don't want to waste any of these. So, but basically we participate in a survey that goes out to external stakeholders each year, and we get responses, and that kind of helps us guide where we build our strategies around what we do in the community, what our focus is on. Again, I never thought a utility company would have a whole sustainability group. We have environmental issues that to deal with, but coming from a perspective this way has changed the culture of the company. So we produce this each year, and we'll have a new one that comes out. But it talks about all our pillars that I mentioned before as well. And then also, we have a sustainability council from the NiSource level that comes together to also decide on, where are our strategic goals moving forward. And we do that every year. So please feel free to take one of these. Don't leave any. But other than that, just any general questions that you might have. And we appreciate you coming out, for sure.
Can we go back to slide 22?
Yes.
And maybe you could explain the fine print at the bottom about why some of these good things have been done?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Do you want to explain it?
Well, part of it, like for instance, I'm working on a project now. I don't know specifically about that consent decree, but I can talk about the fines. We had an issue some years ago where coal fly ash was being used as a filler in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
People use it in their yard. So what we did, basically went through some lawsuits and different things where we had to supply water. We still supply bottled water to some of those residents, but then we also ran municipal water from Michigan City to the pines. So now I'm working on a project there on land issues, ground issues, not water, But those are some of the things that occur over time. At the time, coal fly ash was okay, and then they found that no, it isn't okay. And that's just like with anything else. One week you read about it, it's good, it's okay, and then the next decade is bad for you. With the Clean Air Act, it said that we violated some of the Clean Air Act, and that's how the scrubbers came about, and instituting those at the different gen stations. And that's why they're trying to push away from coal as well, because it releases certain toxins. So that's why we have those scrubbers on there. We actually pushed ours, we're ahead of schedule. And our leadership team decided we were going to get it done sooner than later. So we've been meeting our requirements earlier and sooner than most companies, and we've been ahead. Michigan City is our last one, and that completed this year. We're testing now. So that's part of the Clean Air Act. That was a consent decree item.
Pretty much, my understanding of it is almost every utility, what has coal-fired utility, if they burn coal in the 80s, how it was calculated was basically changed. NiSource, NIPSCO went in and into an agreement with EPA, which would, it basically doesn't admit guilt. It basically says this is what we're going to do moving forward. And part of that is we've set aside several $1 million, what basically for mitigation for what had happened in terms of emissions during the 80s. So it really had to do with kind of a calculation of how that was. So that's how it was.
I was wondering if somebody going to ask that question and come back to it. I almost stopped you and do it. Sorry. That's all right.
I've used your rebate for appliances and things I bought before, but a lot of the stuff, a lot of this is not known, and I kind of wondered how are you disseminating information? I'm a new media major, and I wonder how come a lot of stuff like the 2% for carbon offsets, I didn't know about that either, and I was like, wow, if I didn't know, they might have been already buying that.
The green power.
Yeah, I can talk to that. Our external communications team now, we actually just had our meeting for the year where we talked about communications. A lot of times people don't look at bill inserts, but we put those things in bill inserts. I'm guilty of it. I do everything electronically. And then having meetings like this, I try to meet with, like the housing authorities and different people, different organizations, and try to get the word out. But a lot of it is bill inserts, and then we do a rotation of, what newspaper ads we run, and we do our radio, those different things. But media is so different now because of the internet. Now we have our Facebook page, we do Twitter, but trying to keep up with those things and getting the information out. I know I have a daughter that's graduated from college and one in high school. Just how I interact with those two is completely different. If I can call my daughter 1,000 times, she will not pick up my text or she answers right away.
That's right.
So.
Yeah, to be honest, I was real involved on green power, getting the word out on that. And a lot of it, our best has been direct contact with environmental organizations. We work with Sierra Club. They put out press releases trying to appeal to their, to their supporters. With Save the Dunes, we have with a lot of different organizations like that. We bought space, ad space. They call them Michelangelos in the South Shore train. That was actually probably one of our more effective ways of getting the word out on that one. And we actually, it was kind of a neat advertising ploy that we employed. We used green power to power the South Shore for a month. I think this was last year or the year before? Year before last, yeah. So trying to get the word out like that, but it has been a struggle, and it seems like it's word of mouth is one of the best ways of getting it out there. Direct contact with nonprofits. We bought billboard space along the highways, and we bought a lot of radio ads. And to be honest, I don't know how much That's really,
Well, I know we can tell the difference in 811
yeah.
advertising and the increase in spike in calls and things, but, you know, again, bill inserts and then radio, you just don't know
Yeah.
how effective.
I know VPE, we were advertising a VPE.
I found out about the incentives for rebates through, or the inserts for billings.
How do you make the decision for, putting up new poles versus burying, considering the weather we have?
Cost.
Sometimes,
It's a cost thing.
but isn't it a life cycle cost we should be worried about instead of a stick cost?
Dave might be better equipped to answer that question than me.
You know, a lot of different things go into play on that. When we look at poles, I think right now we're at about 330,000 poles, something like that. Right in that ballpark, something like that. And then we do test on those poles about every 5 to 10 years, something like that. Or we'll actually go out and we will dig down into the earth to get below the line. And then we'll actually bore into those poles and we'll take test samples of those to see where the decay is, see if it's rotting, you know, all of those different things. So there's a lot of things that go into play on determining if that pole needs replaced. Like Angie said, I believe, I want to say a pole will last about 25 to 50 years on the average. Just, again, kind of depending upon the soil conditions and those type of things. With 300 and some thousand poles, we got a lot of work ahead of us. You know, we have a lot of poles out there that need replaced. We've identified that, and we are working aggressively to try to get that done. But it basically goes back to just evaluating pole by pole by looking at every pole every so often to see if it does need replacement.
How about the cost for burying, though? Like, you want to know about burying the line.
Well, I mean, when the
Above
ice
ground
hits
versus under.
and the poles break or the line break, you have people don't have power. I'm just wondering why, when FEMA comes in and says, we had a big ice storm, here's $1 million, put up new sticks, because that'll help. Next year, you still have 2 days without power. It's just a different stick that falls.
Well,
But if you
I tell you what,
bury it-
we've already put up poles and 2 days later, they're knocked over again by a drunk driver or what have you. But yeah, that's just a
But
I
a
do
truck
know-
driver cannot knock down a buried cable.
I do know that we've looked, I mean, we do bury some cables in certain areas, but it's the cost, I mean, it's exponentially higher.
And
Life cycle cost is
Yeah.
exponentially.
Yeah, it's
It's
like,
extremely more.
yeah, I wish I had the figure off the top of my head, but it was,
But there are some subdivisions that do that, but they incur the cost, they pass it on to the resident. And then I had a situation where I called 811 for my yard, and I never found, I was like, okay, is there anything buried in the yard? And so I had one of the linemen come by because I said, I know there's electric buried here somewhere. And the person I bought the house for probably never told me. And I'm glad I didn't dig up the area because my electric line was coming across somebody's driveway. I found out my meter was down the street. We couldn't find our meter. I'm like, where's my, there's gotta be a meter here. And it was down the street, it was coming across someone's driveway, up through my driveway, through the front yard, is a buried electric cable. And they didn't mark the line, because I owned it. And so 811 didn't even mark the line for me. I had no idea I had electric line. So he knew someone who was an electrician that worked that area, who came and marked it for me. But I was thinking, I almost put flowers and all kind of stuff there, and it's one of those things. Now I took pictures and videoed it, because if I sell the house, I mean, you own that line, so if anything happens there, I gotta pay for it. So that's.
it is a good question. I do know that's the main thing.
I'll find out and send you something, Mike, if I can find something on that. You got a question?
Yes, I had a question about coal ash ponds. I know it runs around Michigan City area, like, is there a cleanup plan in place? Coal ash ponds?
Well, we're in compliance with the CCR, the new CCR rule, what it is, but we don't have any fly ash ponds. The only ponds that we have are boiler slag or bottom ash. that's what's in place right now. And most of those ponds are being closed right now because it's being driven by the CCR rule. So we don't wet
Closed and
streams.
remediated as well?
What's that?
Closed and remediated, or you're just not putting more in?
No, some of them are being remediated as far as removal goes of the ash. A lot of things have to be containerized because of the rule too as well. But we don't, like the Dan River and some of these large, we haven't wet sluiced in years. There's basically two different types of ash. You have what's called fly ash, and that has a lot more pollutants that can basically get into nature and screw up the groundwater, for lack of a better term. And then we have what's called boiler slag or bottom ash. Your shingles on your house, that's called Black Beauty. That's boiler slag. That's actually a very marketable product, and we recycle almost 100%. There's a large market for that. And that, it's basically glass. It looks just like lava, or black shards of lava, and it encapsulates all of that pollutant, basically, what inside there. So it doesn't leach readily like that. But that's what we have in place, and basically with this, it's called the CCR, the coal combustion residuals rule. Most of those ponds are regulated, and a lot of them are being closed, actually. We have another rule, what I'm involved in, it's called Effluent Guidelines, ELG rule, and what it's going to require is a closed loop system on those bottom ash / boiler slag ponds. Most of what we have is boiler slag, which is that Black Beauty, the stuff that's under shingles. So that's going to have a closed loop system in place, so we won't even have any discharge or anything like that. Does that make sense?
Hey, Mike, can you guys hear me? Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, this is Kirby Dyford. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. How are you folks? So that's not my question. My question is about the fly ash. I'm extremely interested in that because it is in current literature from the LEED preparation guide, talking about how great fly ash is as an alternative to cement in concrete for buildings. And I'm hearing a lot of discussion about that. What is the negatives on that? So I'm just wondering if LEED is behind or what the story is.
I do know that fly ash has been traditionally used and marketed in cement projects. That's something that, to be honest, I'm not an expert in. So
I'm not either. I just know that from dealing with the pines, there's two different versions. I don't know I'll have to get more information and I can send that to you, but there's two different products from the fly ash that they use like in the road beds and things like that. But then there was a time when they used some of the product to fill in to level the land, and that's where we've been getting into the issue. So I don't know the difference. I'm not an expert in that either, but that's something I can send to my team. If I can find any stories, I'll forward them to them.
I do know that was one of the big things in consideration with the CCR rule, that there was a big fear that if you called fly ash a hazardous substance, then that would really greatly limit the beneficial use market for it. So EPA tried to walk kind of that fine line of how it was categorized, and what I think they call it subtitle D is what they ended up making it. So it could still be used beneficially in products like, cinder block. That's what cinder block is. It's got ash in there. So things like that. If not, it's just going to end up in the landfill.
Probably the big issue is it in there?
Yeah.
And does it leach? My guess is it leaches, it's probably pretty small, but it'd be interesting to know that.
It binds it up, is my understanding, when you put it like in blocks. But
that'd be an interesting, that's a good question.
Yeah, it is.
We've got these kinds of materials that if you process them in the right way, that's one way of sequestering
company behind the scenes, and what are the benefits that you see to the customer? And what would you say to other utility companies that are maybe less encouraged to offer these rates to, say, customers in South Bend, for example? And
I've heard that.
you know, what would you say to other utility customers who are nervous about offering these rates to their customers?
Well, I think one thing that I found, and one thing that sold me, because again, before I joined NIPSCO, I was on the community advisory panel. So I started learning a lot about NIPSCO. It was a change in leadership. That their focus was different. They decided there were certain things we were going to do no matter what. And once that happened, they created the Sustainability Council. And then that council was corporate wide. And then they started, investigating and making decisions. I mean, this started, this has been going on for quite a while. I'm in my 5th year, and this is the only thing I know. This is how it's been since I've been here. And then I'll hear everybody else say, well, they don't do that or they don't offer that. And I think we like saying that we were the first to do it. And then what that shows too, when you start talking about regulators and the IURC, you start building relationships too, and saying, hey, we want to be ahead of this. What can we do? You start getting buy-in from people downstate, and then people start following. If you're the first, somebody's going to follow eventually. And I think we want, we say premier. All our mission statements say we want to be the premier company, and being premier means you have to be a leader. I think that was a lot of it.
I have a couple different ones. One was similar to his, and you sort of touched on it, but as far as just like letting the public know, like my wife's worked at many different nonprofit organizations. Are you working directly with them, like with the case managers and things like that, so that they have that as a tool to then offer to the people that they're helping?
We have I call it a backdoor way for the agencies, like the agencies that help with low income, they have a separate number. So let's say a client comes in that needs assistance. They don't call into the 1-800 for NIPSCO. They call. We have a group of service reps that work specifically with those agencies and getting things, because now you're working with deposits that are being matched, and it's a different strategy. So they actually have their own phone number that they use for that, and then our group that handles that, they come out. They had a meeting in South Bend. They'll meet the agencies, talk through what's new this year, and they do that every year. So that's one thing. The other thing, if you work with any nonprofits or any agencies, if you go to NIPSCO.com, we have a section called Community Investment, and that's where you can apply for grants. So for instance, any grant that comes in my area, if they register there and click on it and they put their county, it'll come to me. But basically, we look at areas of human needs. Is one of our areas. That could be shelter, food, clothing. The other is environmental. We have one for emergency management, which is fire, police, things like that. American Red Cross would be another one. And I think education is the other one. So any nonprofit can apply for a grant. All they just click on community investment on NIPSCO.com, and I get those directly when they come in. So I read every single one of them.
And my other part was, as far as renewable energy, like, do you build wind farms and solar farms, or is that somebody else, and you just purchase that power from them?
Right now, we.
And if so, why not?
Two things. One is the lack of demand. We have enough generation right now to meet demand. Actually, a lot of our stations haven't even been running that much lately.
There's a difference between demand and sustainability.
And yeah, absolutely, and that's why we've invested in. We do buy wind power right now, and we also try to encourage with the feed-in tariff. That's to be honest, it's baby steps. We went from a company 8 years ago where there was none of this existed, that it's moved very rapidly towards a more sustainable future. But we're looking much more closely, especially with clean power plant and so forth. on that. But the other thing is competitive. We have probably one of the most interesting customer profiles of any utility in the country. Half of our base load is industry, it's the steel mills.
And I don't think people realize that.
5 customers.
Yeah, five customers use
40%.
half of our electricity. If we went in and put, I hate to say this, I'm gonna be very blunt, we went in and put in all windmills and turned the switch off on our plants, we're gonna be sued left and right because the prices for providing electricity are gonna go through the roof. So we have to, it's very slow, steady progress, working with the IURC, getting them comfortable with these next process. So like the feed-in tariff was just a pilot in the beginning, and they liked it. It was successful. So it's building on that. It's not something we can just switch because we are an independent company, but we feed in what's called MISO, and MISO is who dispatches electricity. So you have to be competitive on MISO, or they're not going to use your energy too. That's not something NIPSCO has any control over. So, that's a big part of it. I think a lot of people don't realize that really how the grid works and how it's interchanged, and you bid into the MISO. So
What's MISO stand for?
Midwest System Operator.
Midwest, what's that?
Independent, yeah. And I think there's 5 of these in the country, what basically control the grid. MISO is actually located in Carmel, Indiana, and you go into there. I've seen pictures, but it looks like something out of like an Austin Power movie or something. With all the how the power is, and they'll redirect things around where there's these shortages of power in that. But that's for lack of a better term, it's something we've looked at closely. We continue, and we're moving in that direction. So, but
Can I just expand on that just a little
Sure.
bit for you? When we talk about the MISOs and that, just exactly what Dan's saying, is that every utility out there that belongs to the MISO, which covers about a 9-state area right now, I think
Yeah.
it is, from Wisconsin to Indiana and all around us. But what we do as a utility and what other independent producers will also do, we will bid that power in every morning to the MISO. The MISO then dispatches the lowest power first. So if NIPSCO is the lowest power, if we have however much megawatts that we have that we bid in, if we are the lowest power, they will take our power first, then the next one, and the next one, and the next one.
Lowest price.
The lowest price, yes, I'm sorry. And what they will also do, they will also take wind and solar before ours. So they always take that energy first, dispatch that out, and then go to the utilities. So it is possible that they could ask a utility to back off a little bit because they have already met their expected demands.
yeah, that's a great explanation.
But it is really the solar and the water that gets dispatched out first, or solar and wind gets dispatched out first.
I figure you guys probably have some rural outreach, but to go back to the beginning of the lecture about your infrastructure and how is that working for I live out in the middle of the country.
We're changing lines. Actually, if you go out in the eastern part of the, or down like by Royal Center, you're out in, for lack of a better term, kind of the middle of nowhere, and you're seeing gas lines all over the place.
Well, one of the strategies for this year, the big push, our CEO just created a new group, a new business because of our region, and I'm saying Kosciuszko, Marshall, Stark, some of those other areas, Fulton. Really, we had a list, just a long list of customers waiting for natural gas because propane is expensive, natural gas is cheap.
Yeah.
So, we've been encouraging, you have to call in and get on a list. Basically, there's a process now for new business, but they create a whole organization to focus on new business.
It's a big push into our rural areas.
For gas.
Yeah.
Because of propane, natural gas costs versus propane.
Also, in Amish country, that's actually was a big thing with the bishops actually have changed that, where they used to have to be independent, where, you know, self-supporting, but they've changed that because the propane prices have gone up, that one of our big opportunities in terms of new customers are the Amish now too.
Yeah, that's one of our biggest concerns, you know, towards the beginning of winter is that, you know, the fuel prices. Luckily this year it's fairly cheap.
Yeah.
Last year it's $6 a gallon. It's too expensive.
But natural gas is at pretty much an all-time low right now, and it is pretty much for the foreseeable future.
And part of our modernization, our infrastructure plan includes rural main extension. So that was part of the plan. Do so per year. So I encourage anybody that you know, call, because you have to make sure you call in and you get established on that list. That's one of the big things.
You know, I think it's always interesting to note too that, you know, we talk about history repeating itself. And in this particular case, you go back in time, industrial revolution in that, it was the rural electrification. Today, it's the rural gasification.
Yeah, right.
It's really the same thing, only just a little different. The gas is just now starting to catch up with the electric.
So, I'm not sure how, I've never even thought of this before, but like, how do you get the natural gas? Like, do you have just places that you just pump it up from the ground and then just distribute it through the pipes?
A lot of it.
You ship it in and then distribute it that way?
A lot of it's out, for lack of a better term, it's almost like the grid, but it's on the natural gas grid. There's large natural gas transmission lines, but diverse the country. A lot of it comes out of Pennsylvania and the Marcellus region, the Utica. A lot of it comes from the Gulf. A lot of it's coming from the Barnett Shell down in Texas. A lot of it's byproduct because there was this huge boom with the oil industry, and gas is a natural byproduct, like in North Dakota. So a lot of it's coming on line that way too as well. So
you might.
Yeah.
I mean, take your time.
I
always find it so fascinating. I always find it so fascinating though, because you know, you go back in years, the majority of the gas that NIPSCO was receiving was basically coming from the west. Wyoming area, the Rocky Mountains, all of that gas was being pushed east. Well, we found a huge demand up in the northeast, but we couldn't really ever supply that part of the country. NIPSCO was doing pretty good because we had a lot of supply coming right through the bottom of the lakes into northern Indiana. So we had a lot of good supply in that regard. Now, if you look back on when Hurricane Katrina took place in the Gulf, we had a lot of damage on rigs just like everyone else. So those rigs out in the Gulf, they were being damaged. At that time, we decided to start pulling a lot of those rigs back inland. And about the time we started doing that is when shale gas really started taking off. And that's the Marcellus and that Dan is talking about. What we are finding now, we are so rich in this country with energy, and especially natural gas in the way of the shale gas. We are finding now, we are pushing that gas from east back to west. We are starting to back all that back the other way. So it's kind of neat story.
And there's also a lot of push, especially with the instability of Europe, to turn it into what's called compressed natural or liquefied natural gas, LNG, and ship it over, especially with what's going on with Russia. There's a big demand for that now. So you're going to probably see a lot more push towards that for trying to stabilize Europe because of kind of the political instability, for lack of a better term, because the Russians can cut off the natural gas, and what do they have for a supply?
I guess they will take the last one back there in the corner.
A lot of people are focusing on the idea of pushing away from using like fuel and other things. So obviously, like with electric cars and stuff.
Fossil
kind
fuels,
of-
yeah.
Yeah, so get away from fossil fuels. Are people paying attention to the possibility of overextending in the other direction and not paying attention and like excluding other alternatives? So I mean, for example, obviously wind power or turbines need to have room for them. Are people going to go gung-ho? Like, I guess at least in your company, are people paying attention to the possibility of going a little too crazy all at once?
Yeah,
I think we are. I think our portfolio, I think we've done a good job of increasing the diversity in our portfolio. We have the hydros, then we have the natural gas
Yeah.
combined.
It's something I found, you know, there's really, for any type of energy production, there's always some downside to it. So, you know, there was a big push for wind turbines a few years back, and there still is a big push for them. But there's a negative environmental problem because of bird collisions with migratory birds as well as with bats. They were finding that bats are actually, it screws up their sonar, for lack of a better term, and they're running right into a lot of very endangered. So there's this balancing act with Endangered Species Act, and you know, a big push towards wind versus balancing it with Endangered Species Act. So
I mean, we deal with Indiana bats, we deal with the
northern
mussels.
longer, yeah, mussels.
What's the mussels with our dams? I mean,
There's virtually no environmental, you know, way of producing. Everything has a trade-off, is what I'm getting at. So, solar, you know, it's a big push towards solar. There's trade-off if the sun doesn't shine that day, where do you get your electricity? So that's why there's, you know, a lot of other technologies that need to kind of come along. So.
I'm sure there's still questions and conversations to be had. We're not chasing them out anytime soon, and they're not trying to run away from any of us. And so feel free to hang out and continue conversation with these. Let me thank Angie and Dan for joining us.
On your last day, thank you so much for
having us. Yeah, Dave for tagging along and hanging out. So he's retiring today. Tomorrow's his last day. So
thank you, Angie and David. Very informational, educational, and thank you so much for trying to keep things balanced with the operations there.
thank you.
See y'all next week.